The siren isn't a digital chirp. It isn't a polite notification pinging on a sleek glass screen. It is a physical, overwhelming screen, a klaxon. It bounces off the concrete walls of the bunker, drowning out the hum of the cooling fans and the nervous shuffle of boots. It is just after midnight, September 26th, 1983. We are deep inside a secret facility known as Serpukhov 15, about an hour's drive south of Moscow. The air is recycled, smelling faintly of ozone and stale coffee. And in front of a man named Stanislav Petrov, a large backlit screen has just turned a terrifying shade of red. The word flashing in the center of the room is simple. It doesn't need translation to convey its horror. Launch. According to the most sophisticated early warning system in the Soviet Union, the United States has just fired a nuclear intercontinental ballistic missile. The target is the USSR. The flight time is less than 30 minutes. Stanislav Petrov is 44 years old. He's a lieutenant colonel in the Soviet Air Defense Forces. He is holding a telephone receiver in a hand that is suddenly sweating. His job description is terrifyingly binary. Watch the board. If the board says launch, report it to the Kremlin. The Kremlin will then authorize the counterstrike. If he speaks the words the system is begging him to speak, the world ends in approximately 45 minutes. This is where we usually imagine the action hero, the one who cuts the wire or kicks down the door. But tonight, I want to tell you a story about a different kind of action, a story about the immense muscular power of a question. We often mistake magnanimity for weakness. We think of it as just being nice or soft, but the root of the word is Latin, magna anima, meaning great-souled. It implies a capacity to hold space, to encompass a larger reality than the one immediately screaming in your face. Tonight, we're going to look at how a great-souled question can stop a machine designed for destruction. To understand the weight of the phone in Petrov's hand, you have to understand the room he was standing in. He wasn't looking at a radar screen. He was looking at data from a system called OKO, or the Eye. This was the crown jewel of Soviet engineering. It relied on a constellation of satellites in a highly elliptical path known as a Molniya orbit. These satellites didn't look down at the ground. They looked sideways at the edge of the Earth's disk. They were designed to spot the heat signature of a missile engine against the cold, dark background of space. And right now, the system is screaming that it sees a heat signature, a missile, rising from a base in Montana. The protocol is strict. There is no time for debate. The logic of mutually assured destruction relies on speed. If they launch, you launch. The balance of terror is maintained only by the promise of instant reaction. But Petrov freezes. He doesn't shout orders. He narrows his eyes at the big red board, and he asks a question that seems absurd in the face of the apocalypse. Why only one? Petrov was a trained engineer. He knew the doctrine. He knew that if the Americans were going to start World War III, they wouldn't throw a single rock. They would empty the silo. They would try to overwhelm the Soviet defenses with hundreds of missiles simultaneously. To launch just one missile was tactical suicide. It didn't make sense. The room is chaotic. Officers are shouting. The siren is still blaring, a deafening rhythmic pulse designed to bypass logic and trigger adrenaline. Petrov stands up. He raises his voice over the noise. "False alarm," he says. "It is a false alarm." He says it with a certainty he does not actually feel. He is gambling everything, his career, his life, and the lives of 200 million Soviet citizens, on a hunch about human nature and the fallibility of machines. He reports it up the chain. System malfunction. Stand down. But the test isn't over. A minute later, the siren screams again. The system detects a second missile, then a third, then a fourth, then a fifth. Now the board shows 5 missiles inbound. The text on the screen changes from launch to missile attack. Imagine the psychological pressure. One missile might be a glitch, but 5? 5 looks like a pattern. 5 looks like a coordinated strike group. The officers around him are looking at him with wide, terrified eyes. They are waiting for him to correct his mistake. They are waiting for him to doom the world. This is the moment where the reactive mind takes over. The reactive mind says, the pattern is clear, the danger is imminent, protect yourself, strike back. But Petrov stays in the magnanimous space. He holds the tension. He looks at the data again. He thinks about the computer system, the OKO. It was new. It had been rushed into service. He knew the software was twitchy. And again he returns to his anchor, his questioning logic. Even 5 missiles is too few. 5 missiles is not a war. It's a mistake. He holds the phone. He tells the voice on the other end, I am reporting a false alarm. And then he waits. This is the part of the story we often skip over, the waiting. The 20 minutes of agonizing silence that followed his decision. If Petrov was wrong, the first nuclear warheads would detonate over the Soviet Union in roughly 15 minutes. He would feel the shockwave before he heard the confirmation. While Petrov is sweating through his shirt in 1983, I want to take you to a very different scene, years later, to show you that this mechanism, this refusal to react, isn't just for nuclear scientists. Shift your mind from the concrete bunker to a smoky bar in Maryland. A black blues musician named Daryl Davis is sitting at a table. He's just finished a set. A white man approaches him, puts an arm around him, and says, You know, this is the first time I've ever heard a black man play piano like Jerry Lee Lewis. Davis, rather than taking offense, explains that Jerry Lee Lewis learned his style from black blues players. The man is skeptical. He admits casually that he is a member of the Ku Klux Klan. Now, the reactive response here is obvious. Fear, anger, departure. The siren is going off. This man represents a threat. But Davis, like Petrov, stays in the room. He asks a question. It is the defining question of his life. How can you hate me when you don't even know me? Davis doesn't attack the man. He invites him to sit. Over years, Davis continues this specific, dangerous work. He attends rallies, he sits in living rooms under Confederate flags. He doesn't lecture, he questions. He forces the hateful logic to confront itself, just as Petrov forced the military logic to confront the reality of the censors. And the result is tangible. In Davis's closet, he keeps a collection. It's not records or awards. It is a row of satin robes and hoods, red, white, and green. They were given to him by imperial wizards and grand dragons, who, after knowing him, could no longer justify their hate. They quit the Klan and surrendered their symbols to the man they were sworn to destroy. A reactive act would have solidified their wall. A magnanimous question dismantled it, brick by brick. Back in Serpukhov 15, the 20 minutes are up. The ground-based radar systems, which look over the horizon for objects coming closer, finally come online to verify the satellite data. If there are missiles, the radar will see them now. The radar screens sweep. Green lines trace the empty air. Nothing. The sky is empty. The tension in the bunker snaps like a rubber band. Men slump into their chairs. The red missile attack sign is still flashing, but it has lost its power. It is a ghost. Petrov was right. So what actually happened? Was it a computer glitch? A hacker? No, it was something far more poetic and terrifying. It was the autumn equinox. The sun, the satellite, and the clouds over North Dakota had aligned in a rare, precise geometry. The sunlight had reflected off the tops of high-altitude clouds at just the right angle to hit the satellite sensors. The computer, programmed to look for the bright heat of a rocket exhaust, saw the sun glinting off a cloud and screamed, "Missile." It happened 5 times. 5 shafts of sunlight. 5 missiles. Here is the tragedy of the reactive system. It cannot distinguish between the sun and a bomb. It only knows thresholds. It only knows triggers. And here is the complexity of the human legacy. You might expect Petrov to be carried out on shoulders, champagne popping, medals pinned to his chest. But that didn't happen. The Soviet military was embarrassed. Their billion-ruble system had been defeated by a cloud. Petrov was reprimanded, not for saving the world, but for failing to properly log the incident in his paperwork during the crisis. He was sidelined, moved to a less sensitive post, and eventually retired early. He lived in a small flat in a Moscow suburb, his story unknown to the world until the Soviet Union collapsed. When we talk about balance or magnanimity, it often sounds abstract, but in 1983, it looked like a sweaty man holding a plastic phone, refusing to believe the red letters in front of his face. It looked like the courage to ask, "Does this make sense?" Petrov passed away in 2017. Daryl Davis is still out there collecting robes. Both of them teach us the same thing. The destructive act is easy. It is fast. It is programmed into our biology and our technology. The creative act, the act that saves us, is the pause, the breath, the question.